Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Good Grain Podcast. Here with the always talented Mike Baker.
Heyo.
What's up? So last episode, we kind of went over Mike's story. Thank you for sharing. If you missed that, head back over and check it out. And today, I guess I'm on the hot seat.
Yep, it's you. It's your turn.
Yeah. So I'm going to let Mike kind of take it away because I don't know how to start my own story.
Yeah. So, when did you, what was the beginning? How did you get into photography? I mean, was it something were you like 5 years old, just rocking out these amazing photos, shooting weddings? What was the deal?
I wish that, I wish I had like granddad's old camera that got passed down and, but that really wasn't the case. My household, similar to yours, was pretty creative growing up, but it wasn't, photography was never really part of that.
Yeah.
Like my mom and my sister are probably the two most creative people ever.
What was their medium? What were they doing?
The medium was basically anything. So my mom was really talented at like crafts. So basically creating something out of nothing. So, she was a really good artist, in the traditional sense, like she could draw really well and paint as well. But her thing was like sewing.
Gotcha.
So she would make like our Halloween costumes.
Nice.
And, she was like the Queen of Hearts. Like
what was the most legendary Halloween costume she made you?
For me, the only one that I can remember was like a legit Jack in the Box, where like you could,
yes,
I was little. You could, the lid would open and have like a little springy thing to it, and it was a lot of fun. So that was kind of her world. But my sister, to this day, she's still probably the most talented artist I know.
Yeah.
And I went to school for art. Been around a lot of talented people, but she's somebody who you can just say, "Hey, I want a unicorn, in Hogwarts, cook it up," and she'll have the whole thing done in incredible detail.
Yeah.
And
so your household was pretty creative. You were around like now. Was it creative? Like, oh, creativity is cool, art's cool, but was it something that you felt like you could make a living at?
So that was always the interesting thing that I didn't really reflect on until as I've gotten older, but. My mom worked at the hospital and like the blood bank. So, her
Sweet.
upbringing was like, you can do creative stuff, but you can't do that for money.
Yeah.
And the other thing is I grew up on a farm as well. So my stepdad, my dad, he was the firstborn on a farm, type A, get your work done.
Sure.
Like, put those pencils away, dude. Like,
yeah.
I need you to help me get these cows across the street.
Yeah.
I mean, so it wasn't discouraged, but it was never encouraged as a profession.
It's not a career. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, that's fun. You're really
go
good
get a
at
job.
that. But go get a job. So, so actually as we went to school and we're still kind of doing stuff at home.
Yeah.
I ended up, majoring in engineering at Clemson. So that was
what you do.
That was what you do. Several folks in my family had gone there, and my uncle, is an engineer. He graduated from there. So I was like, I guess that's the thing that
here's what I do. Yeah.
So I kind of went that route. But before I left school, what I really wanted to do was make surfboards.
Yeah.
Like that was...
So photography was nowhere on the table. You're like, I'm going to make surfboards, live on the beach, and
absolutely.
Have a great life.
So, it's a little odd growing up on a farm in Lake City, but, I got really into surfing when I was like 15. I don't remember why, but that was always a really cool thing, is that if I ever wanted to do anything new, it was like, absolutely, we'll go try it.
Go for it. Yeah.
Like you're never going to take it anywhere.
Yeah.
But if you want to go surf, have fun. Cool. You want to go skate, do that. And,
so you get to like, 18, 19, you're like, I'm going to make surfboards, but I'm going to be an engineer.
I don't, and I thought that I could do them in tandem, right? Like I'll go to school, but what I'm really going to do is I'm going to make surfboards.
Yeah.
And, first semester in college, right away that is not going to happen.
Yeah.
So I wasn't really digging anything with the engineering program. It's not that I couldn't do it. It's just I didn't enjoy it, which is kind of odd to say, because that's kind of how my mind is.
I was about to say, knowing you, I'd be like, yes, you should be an engineer.
Yeah. And so that's kind of the thing. But I knew that wasn't going to be a thing for me long term. And so, so my mom ended up passing at the end of my freshman year of college. And then after that, I had no earthly idea what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
So that was a big kind of shakeup. And so I ended up moving back to Florence and just went to Francis Marion for business. Like, I guess I got to get a degree in something.
And just something,
In something.
And still not thinking creative, like, you're not going into a creative field.
I was still very much like, I got to get a job,
Yeah.
do the thing that I hated about Clemson was the thing that I was still trying to do in Florence. Like just the fitting this mold that had kind of been passed down of this is what an adult does. But I remember having a pretty big heart to heart with a mentor of mine. And he was like, listen, I understand you're not digging school, but you need a degree in something. It doesn't really matter what, but it would, nobody's ever said, hey, that degree really bit me in the rear today. Like you need to finish school. And I agree and disagree with that point for different reasons. So I said, all right, I like to draw, I guess. So hey, why, there's a painting major here. That's the closest thing.
Let me major in painting. So and you're like, I'm going to major in painting and go make surfboards. That's
that's what I kind of tried to do. So I made a handful of really terrible surfboards and just a couple of really good ones. But as I kind of got further into school and into painting, I really enjoyed it, but still was not thinking.
Yeah, you're not going to be a painter for your career.
Yeah, I'm not going to be a painter. I'll go pursue this surf thing in a few years after I get done.
Sure.
But it was towards the end of I guess it was either spring, it might have been spring semester. So like the end of junior year, I had an elective, which was a black and white film photography class.
Nice.
And dude,
artsy pics of rusty garage doors.
Oh yeah, and that's the funny thing about college classes with art stuff. It's like they're trying to teach you principles, but you don't know anything, and so it's like, hey, your assignment is basically get a proper exposure.
Sure.
Right. It doesn't even matter what the picture is.
Something.
Right. So to your point, you go on the train track and find like a rusty can, and you're like, look at this
art
F8. I can see down everything.
So what kind of camera? I mean, I'm assuming they let you use some kind of camera from the school.
So so the school had a handful of cameras, and one that was the only photography class in the school. So it's not like you could choose anything else. It was black and white film photography. So the school had like a stash of a hodgepodge of different film cameras, all kind of in the Canon AE1.
Sure, like
vein.
Intro to film shooting.
Right.
Like,
so it's a 35 millimeter. If the lenses were interchangeable, we didn't have an option to change them.
Yeah, you've got one lens, you got a body, and
it was either a 50 or a 35. It was something.
What film were you shooting on? Film
so we had to pick two different ones, and one was a I guess kind of a normal light and low light. I don't remember if it was ISO 160 or 400.
Gotcha.
But I do remember the other one was 800. So that's kind of as high as we went, and they were both Kodak films. I don't remember.
Maybe.
Yeah, probably Tri-X.
Gotcha.
But again, black and white.
Yeah.
So
sure.
We went to the only camera shop in town, which was Color Quick.
Color Quick. Had some VHSs made, DVDs there.
Yeah, rock on Color Quick if you know that reference. They have gone the way of the buffalo there, unfortunately. But you walk in, you say, "Hey, I'm a student. This is my class," and they just kind of
like, "Here you go. Here's what you need. Yeah,
here's the stuff." And even buying film then, when it was like $5 or $6 a roll as a college student, you're like, I got to buy how many rolls?
Yeah,
like 30 rolls. Are you kidding me?
Hold up. Yeah,
yeah. And so I had a blast in that class.
Yeah,
learning how to process.
So this is
film.
your first real experience with photography at this point.
I had not,
aside from like maybe an odd photo. Yeah,
maybe an odd photo. I mean, if I had shot a picture, it was on some friend's camera phone to promote a surfboard. Like, hey, here's what I did. We'll archive it somewhere. Now, we goofed around on like home video cameras and stuff. Making dumb videos with your friends.
Sure,
but even that was like, oh, you have one of the little cameras.
You didn't even care what it was. Yeah,
it's like, oh, let's record this dumb thing.
Sure.
And that was really it. But
so this is your junior year in college is your first true experience with photography.
Oh yeah. And I fell in love right away. I mean, there was something about it, and I didn't really even understand a lot of the technical aspect. I mean, I got an A in the class, but it still didn't mean you know anything.
Yeah.
Like
I got plenty of A's.
It just means I did the assignments the way I was asked to do them.
Had no clue what I was doing.
And so the way the teacher explained a lot of stuff, like I still didn't really get the exposure triangle in a way that like made sense to me out in the field. I just kind of looked at the meters and said, I think
it's in the middle.
Kind of works. Yeah. So I wasn't necessarily taking great pictures, but I knew
Yeah.
there was something about that medium that I enjoyed over painting or over ceramics or over, just basic
Something
drawing.
clicked. You were like, this is
Yeah,
it.
and not to discredit any of those things. I mean, I still love them
Yeah.
in their own right. I still have several of my paintings. I have a few ceramic stuff that I've made, but the art of capturing what you see in a way that tells a story
Hmm.
was something that I just kind of really enjoyed doing.
Sure.
But I still wasn't thinking about it
Yeah. You're
necessarily
not thinking about it as a career.
and that was probably my biggest downfall is that I wasn't thinking of anything as a career.
Yeah.
Even graduating school, I was like, I don't know
Figure it out at some
where I'm
point.
going to go with this. But ended up moving to Kentucky for a year to work at a church actually.
Yeah.
And that kind of fell through, and then
Sure.
ended up moving to Charleston, fall of 2010.
So I think backing up for a second, when did you get your first camera? When did you get your like how did you acquire your first reel? And I say reel, I mean like DSLR, multiple lens,
No, that was actually a huge moment for me. So when I graduated school, a bunch of my friends pulled some money together and got me a brand new, at the time, Canon 50D with the nifty 50 lens on it. And I
Nice.
remember graduating and opening that thing up. And
Yeah.
I remember it so well because they gave it to me, and and as soon as I graduated, I hopped in the car with a good friend of mine, and we drove straight to Key West.
Nice.
So I had that whole trip to unbox it
Yeah,
and
and you're
open
like
it up
figuring it out.
and
So
figuring it
stoked.
out.
Yeah.
So it made a portion of the ride faster.
Yeah.
That's still a pretty brutal drive.
Yeah. So I mean, you would enjoy that class so much. Like obviously people knew that you had, and so they were like, we're gonna hook it up with this pretty nice camera.
Yeah, and I don't remember what the communication was like. I don't know
Sure.
if people could just see it or if I talked about it.
Yeah.
I don't really remember that part.
But
I was
regardless, I
very
mean,
fortunate.
you get the camera, then you still are not thinking about it as a career because obviously you go to Kentucky for a little bit and then you come
Right.
back home. Still, I'm assuming not thinking about anything remotely close to photography as a job or a career.
No, and I really wasn't even necessarily shooting a ton.
Yeah.
When I was in Kentucky, I shot a few things here. Like I shot pictures of my guitar, or
Yeah.
like the leaves on the ground in the fall, or
Sure.
like here's some horses because you're in bluegrass country. Like it was still very much a hobby I enjoyed, but I was pursuing a different job in Kentucky. And then when we moved to Charleston, that was just that was a big kind of reset for me and my then fiance. She moved to Charleston as well, and I started working because I needed a job when I got there. And I didn't have anything, and so I got a job working at a deli down there. It's called Mozzo Deli.
great
If you're ever
deli.
in Mount Pleasant, Coleman Boulevard.
Yep.
Mozzo Mozzo Deli and
Yep.
Catering.
They need to be the first sponsor of the show.
Oh,
Please.
please.
Not for money. Just send us
Ship in the
sandwiches.
chicken parms. Come on,
Yep.
bring them on.
Done.
And I worked there for a little over 2 years, probably about 2.5 years. And the first year and a half in, I actually fell in love with the art medium of cooking. So, my boss, even though he owned and operated a deli, he was actually a really good chef. And when we would cater these kind of high end parties, you think Daniel Island, Mount Pleasant,
Sure.
and he lived on
Pretty
Daniel
affluent.
Island. So
Big,
so
big
he would
time.
cater this stuff, and just the stuff that he would make, I was just a sponge, and that was a whole different creative medium for me. And I still love to cook.
Yeah,
Don't get
that's
me
awesome.
wrong. But he was like, "Hey, I want to open up another deli, and I want you to manage it."
Uh-huh.
And the thing about Shannon, my boss, is he's a visionary and has amazing ideas and is really good at what he does and is a good leader, but has zero execution. Like it was still probably 7 or 8 years after I left before he opened his next shop.
Yeah.
So a year goes by after him saying, "Hey, I want you to do this," but he's not pulling the trigger. And I'm like, well, I got to do something. I had been married for a year at that point, and there's only so much, especially in Mount Pleasant, that a low wage deli job can get you. And I think my wife was working for Half Moon Outfitters at the time.
Yeah.
And
so you're rocking the deli job. She's got, a retail job with Half Moon in Charleston, and you're I'm assuming again, you're taking a few more photos at this point because I'm not too far down the road. You're starting to pick it up a little more.
Yeah, and so the thing that really helped me in Charleston is it's Charleston, right? It's
Yeah.
really hard to take a bad picture
Sure.
down
It's
there,
gorgeous.
unless you're just pointing it at the pavement. I mean,
Even the
you've
pretty
got
sweet pavement.
downtown area, that whole peninsula. You've got beaches galore. You've got
Yeah.
landscape,
Massive,
and
cool live oaks. I mean, all
and
kinds of
Angel Oaks
stuff.
down there. So
Yeah.
there was a lot of opportunity for me to really just put in time
Yeah.
behind a lens that I didn't really know what that was pushing me towards. We took a ton of pictures of our dog, and
Yeah.
some of those pictures are still some of my favorites.
Sweet. Yeah.
But I started, since the deli thing wasn't going as fast as I wanted it to, and the reality is we just needed more money to grow a family, and I thought, well, why don't I give this photography thing a shot? And that was the first time I had ever really even considered it. And part of it, I guess, was kind of ignorance and naivety, saying that I can pull it off. I've never been paid to take a picture for
Ignorance
anybody.
is your greatest weapon.
And I had done maybe 1 or 2 family sessions for friends. Like, you got a camera, take it. But
Sure.
I was in this weird limbo area of, okay, if I'm going to do photography for a living, what kind?
Yeah.
Because people will pay you to take pictures of anything.
Sure.
But what do you
want to take pictures of?
What am I going to get paid for? Like, what do people pay the most for? What are the,
Yeah, because I think that
want to do
that what you're saying right now is important, because I mean you can go whatever route obviously you want to with photography, but if you want to get paid and make a living, there are certain categories that pay.
Yeah. And I was definitely approaching it that way, not so much of like, oh, I love taking pictures of hermit crabs. Let me do that. It was where
you could have been the greatest hermit crab photographer of all time,
probably. But it was what do people actually pay for?
Sure.
And so as I started digging through that, you can go down a whole rabbit hole on Google and say, oh, what can you make money in photography in? It's like, you can make money in the same way you can say, yes, you can be a musician in Nashville.
Yeah.
Like, yes, you can, but chances are you're probably not going to compete with the massive amount of competition that there is.
Yeah,
so,
sure.
So I started just browsing through photographers' stuff.
Yeah.
Commercial photographers, car photographers.
And you're just hopping on your computer and just Googling what photographers in Charleston. I mean,
I don't even know if it was in Charleston, but it was just anything on the lines of professional photography. What's it supposed to be? What do people take pictures of? Are my pictures supposed to even look a certain way? Just trying to get information to make a decision. And I remember combing through a friend of mine's, well, I didn't know it at the time, but I found a wedding photographer in Charleston. Her name was Tracy Turpin. She has since passed. But I remember looking through her portfolio and I saw some friends of mine on there, and I was like, oh,
hey,
she's
cool.
who took their engagement pictures.
Yeah.
And as I was just scrolling through her stuff, I got sucked in. I mean, there was something about her eye and her style at the time. I mean, looking back on it now, it's so super saturated, heavy vignettes.
Sure, but I mean, it's
but that was mid 2011, maybe.
That's how everybody was doing it.
Yeah, but there was something about her composition and shot choices and just the use of wide, medium, tights, and it told everything she shot told a story that I could kind of feel through looking at it. And there was some pretty obvious emotion in pictures, and some obviously laughter and movement and all the things. But she was a wedding photographer.
Yeah,
I was like, well, if I can take these kind of shots at a wedding, I'll shoot weddings.
Yeah,
apparently, there's weddings in Charleston all the time. Apparently, it's the number one destination to go. Still is that way. And so I did what I thought was the proper thing to do based off of everything that I had read, which was, I did searches. How do you get started in photography?
Yeah.
And the search led me to, well, you assist somebody and then you start shooting and then you do your own thing. And I was like, okay, well, let me do that. And so I found about 15 photographers whose stuff I liked in the Charleston area, emailed all of them, said, hey, here's who I am. This is what I'm looking to do.
Yeah.
This is my equipment. I have zero wedding experience. I just want to come see, hold your bags. I'll work for free. Whatever the pitch was, it was basically, I'm not worthy. Just let me show up. And only one person responded.
Nice. That
and they
sounds
replied,
about right.
They replied no. But they followed with, but there is a local group of photographers who meets once a week for lunch. You should come.
Yeah.
Which was great. But I worked at a deli.
Yeah. So
And
you're not leaving at lunchtime.
Right.
Yeah.
My boss is not going to be like,
Yeah, sure. Go.
he's
Yeah.
northerner from Connecticut, kind of a hard ass in his own right. And,
Yeah.
there's no way he was letting me off at peak lunch hours
To
to go
go-
sit and talk with a bunch of photographers.
Not a chance. Yeah.
He's like, yeah, you can do that on your own time.
Yeah.
Good luck. So that really wasn't an option for me at the time. So I undercut everybody.
Nice.
I did as much homework as I could and got a rough estimate of what people charged. And I posted ads on Craigslist saying, hey, I don't even remember what the phrasing was, but it was basically, let me shoot your wedding, and I probably phrased it a little bit better, but
yeah. What do you like? What, $100?
I ended up booking one for $200.
Whew, that's
and
what's
even
up.
to me at the time, I was like, oh my gosh, are they gonna pay? Like, are they gonna walk? It's $200. Like, I knew it wasn't too much, but having zero experience, I'm like, they're gonna see right through me.
Like, oh my God.
They are gonna know that I am, BSing my way through this whole conversation. And, if they knew, they didn't really make it known, but
they also are probably stoked just to find somebody for $200.
Yeah. And obviously they liked enough of what they saw to say, yeah, we'll give this dude a shot. And it was somewhere in like North Columbia. It wasn't even in Charleston. So
you have your 50D. You have your nifty 50.
And yep, I had that and the 1.8. And the plus side about weddings is that, typically you have at least a 6-month lead time for weddings. Typically, occasionally you get the one-off
random
short stuff. But I think I had about 8 months to prepare for this wedding, which was amazing.
So it's like you have one goal,
I had one goal. So obviously, doing the deli during the day. But as soon as I would get home, I would take my dog out for a walk. I would, shoot some pictures of him. And then I was on the computer absorbing every bit of information about how in the world do you do a wedding.
So where's your knowledge at this point? I mean, do you know anything about RAW? Like, are you changing your color profile on your camera? Are you messing with white balance? Like, are you in auto?
So Lightroom had just come onto the scene right about the time. I mean, it had been around for 3 or 4 years at this point, but not bigger, really as a heavy tool, because in school, Photoshop was what we used, right, for everything.
Gotcha.
So, which is a nightmare for editing picture after picture. I mean, it's just not great in that regard. So I had started teaching myself Lightroom a little bit, but I didn't know squat about what I was doing. I eventually made my way into RAW. It wasn't that way in the beginning. It was, JPEGs on standard profile and call it a day. And was still trying to edit JPEGs and push them, and they're just falling apart. But I thought they looked great anyway. But I eventually made my way into RAW, and that may even have been only because I was looking at how do you do weddings.
Yeah,
and it's like, hey, you need to shoot in RAW. I'm like, why? Like what?
Yeah, So you're researching. You have 8 months, and I mean, did you rock your one lens for that whole wedding? Did you pick up another? Like, what kind of gear did you go into this thing with?
So I went in, and I don't even remember how I bought it, but I ended up buying the first version of the 24-70 2.8 L lens.
I mean, fantastic lens.
Yeah, fantastic lens, but still in the 50D body. And by the time the wedding came around, I had acquired some speed light. I don't remember what model. It was either a
some kind of external flash.
Yeah, it was not a 580, but it's like a 430 EX2 maybe.
Enough to do.
Yeah, enough for a small room. Yeah. And fortunately, this wedding was at like 2:00. So it wasn't even that low light anyways, which was great. Because I don't think I would have been able to handle that.
Directly at the people.
It probably would have been bad.
Smoking people.
But over that 8-month time span leading up to the wedding, I mean, I soaked up everything. YouTube wasn't really around in the sense it is today. Like, there was nobody teaching you how to do stuff in this
So you're reading blogs at this point.
Yeah, like blogs, any
like
article.
Our forefathers used to do.
There were a few educational photography shows that were trying to get their feet underway, like the Framed Network. Creative Live was just starting.
Really? Okay.
And it was only like maybe a class.
I was about to say, I didn't realize they were pre-YouTube.
Yeah, and all of those platforms helped me enough to stumble upon a guy named Kevin Kubota. And he had a book that was all about these lighting techniques. I think I have it somewhere.
Nice.
But what the book did is Yeah, this is in the days you have to actually read still. And what the book did is it had diagrams. So he would, on one page would be the image,
Okay.
and on the second page would be the BTS of how to make the image. So he'd
Dang.
have the little, essentially little stick figures of here's where
Yeah.
the people are, here's the camera and the lens
Showing
and,
where,
and the
yeah.
settings,
Wow.
and here's where you put your lights to
Wow.
pull it off. And so, you know, you would just say, okay, well, I'll try this.
Cool.
And of course, you could never replicate it because
Yeah.
one, you're not
The conditions are never going to be the same.
Like they're never the same. And so I actually got really discouraged with that. But ended up kind of pressing through, you know, went to the wedding, made it through. And at the end of it, I was like, I can do weddings.
I can do this.
I can do this. And so I had a portfolio at that point, right? I shot one wedding. So now I'm a pro.
You have,
right. And
you've made it. You can retire. Yeah.
I don't remember quite, you know, the progression, but I threw up a website, you know, not too much longer after the wedding, and I think it was made with like Wix or something like that.
Nice.
Squarespace didn't exist at the time.
Ah, tragic.
Yeah, and so I made it with Wix because I didn't have any money to pay anybody to make a website.
Yeah.
I didn't have any money to have anybody even make a logo. So I called a friend of mine back here in Florence, who now is a fantastic graphic designer. Shout out to The Creative Pain. Go on Instagram, look up The Creative Pain. His name is Tyler Pate. He is the man. And so I paid him, I don't know, maybe $100 to do my logo because he was still a student at Francis.
Is it your current logo now?
It's
is
the
it
current
still
one that I have for James McCoy Photography.
Wow.
He crushed it. And at least for me, he did exactly what I asked him to do. If you don't like my logo, then I can't help you. But he did exactly what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
Went above and beyond, and was great. But I kind of hobbled some assets together, and I had a wedding website, and so I don't even remember how I got bookings at that point.
Yeah.
I wasn't doing advertising. You know, this was kind of the days when blogs were just starting. This whole concept of you need revolving traffic on Google to get ranked. I mean, I had to learn all of that stuff to figure out how to do it.
On top of learning
how to actually be a photographer.
So
working at a deli.
Yes, I mean, so you're still at the deli. You've done one wedding. You're starting to get a few more bookings. You've got some decent lenses at this point. You're still on the 50D. Got a flash though.
Yep.
So I mean, you know that. So year one, you do a handful of weddings, right?
I think I maybe did 6 or 7 before I really considered quitting the deli.
Yeah.
And in hindsight, I should have stayed at least another 12 months just to save up some capital.
Sure.
But I had shot enough to have a better portfolio. And every wedding I would shoot, I was just slowly raising prices up. You know, maybe the next one was like $400 and then 6. And then that, you know, I was trying not to go too much because every time I raised it, even like $100, like nobody's going to hire me. This is going to be terrible. And so as my experience grew, my knowledge grew, and my portfolio grew, I was like, I'm quitting the deli. We're out. And I think I just kind of convinced my wife that things were better than they were. And she had a lot of faith in me, and and we did that. And I ended up shooting my first year of official full-time business. I think I shot 16 weddings,
which is good.
Yeah, it was great. And then the next year I shot like 22, and I had some second shooting gigs along the way. I had started to build a network of people that I was assisting here and there. So I think within the first 2 years I had shot maybe about 40 weddings.
Yeah.
And then the third year hit.
Yeah.
And again, I was raising prices along. And by year 3, I had set my price point at the lowest average in the area, which I think was maybe like $2,300 or $2,400 for a wedding, even with like an engagement session, you know, and people were still getting a good deal. But in the area, it was lower end of the average.
Do you know what year this was? Just curious.
2013, I think.
Okay. Gotcha.
I think 2013.
So as you're going to your third year, you've raised your prices to somewhat more of the average around the area.
Yeah, it was what I would consider normal low range prices. I mean, but it was huge for me.
Yeah.
And then the phone stopped ringing, if you will. You know, I wasn't getting the same volume of emails, and you know, along I was trying to figure out how to do it. And so sometimes I would have my prices on the website, sometimes I wouldn't.
Yeah.
There's this big argument in how you're supposed to do it. Like right now, I don't have my prices on my website, and for me, that just seems to work more consistently than having them on
Yeah.
there. You know,
Yeah. I think our strategy aligns of like, I want to get you on the phone. Like, I want to talk to you.
Yeah, I mean, by and large, if I sit down with a bride, I've only ever not closed 2 out of every single wedding I've ever
Sure.
shot when I've sat down with somebody.
Yeah. So yes. I mean, so you're in year 3. How many weddings do you remember?
I think I only ended up shooting like 8.
Okay.
And so I went from 22 to
Sure.
8.
I mean, yeah.
And a handful of second shooting
Huge
gigs.
difference. Yeah.
Huge difference. And so while the money was close to the prior year, I mean, it wasn't far off at the end of the year.
Sure, you're charging,
But the problem was, because I hadn't stayed at the deli long enough to raise up capital, because weddings are so seasonal, right? You have that spring, early summer push, and then the fall, early winter push. And so because I had less weddings in both of those seasons, all of those low shoulder seasons, we were just hurting financially. And so I ended up going to work. I think I started part-time at the Half Moon Warehouse in North Charleston. And, that made actually shooting pretty difficult, because before,
I mean, your schedule's all of a sudden locked in.
Yeah, you got to be at work. And so it made it harder to answer emails in a timely fashion. It made it harder to take the one-off random gigs. And so, part-time became full-time, and, I was really starting to doubt whether or not I had not only made the right choice, but also in myself.
Yeah.
Like what was it about? Do people not like my pictures? Were my prices too high? Like, I was really questioning the business, because I had succeeded in the year 1 statistic, like, 90% of businesses fail in year 1, supposedly.
Yeah.
But I was failing in the 5-year statistic, which is, of those 10% that do succeed, 60% of those will fail in the next 5. And so, I don't know what that math works out to, but I was not in that low percentile of, making it past 5 in that trajectory. So I got really discouraged, and, considered kind of hanging it up, or do I quit Half Moon and push it further? I mean, I really didn't know what I was going to do. But then I got offered a job to come to Florence, because a friend of mine had started he had a commercial video business, and he was starting a radio station and needed somebody to kind of, I guess, hold the fort down while the radio station was getting underway. And so, I mean, I had maybe shot 2 videos ever.
Yeah, I mean, you're in photo world. You're not video world,
by then I was on a 5D Mark II.
Yep. So you had fantastic frame.
Camera. I had full frame. I still had the 24 to 70. I'm pretty sure I had a 70 to 200 by then. I mean, I had the standard wedding kit, 24 to 70, 7200 in a flash. You
had
could
most of the Trinity.
Yeah, most of the Trinity. And so, I turned the job down initially, because
you're like, I'm not moving to Florence.
Yeah, that was exactly it. We didn't want to move to Florence. But the reality is, we had also had I had a 1-year-old at that point.
Yeah.
We had our son in 2012. And so, late 2013 is, when we got the job offer, or it might have been really early 2014. But regardless, we turned it down. It was like, I don't want to move to Florence. Like, Charleston, Florence, but shortly after that, my wife got offered a job in Florence as well. And her family lives here in Florence, is where she's from. And so childcare was hard in Charleston. She's working, I'm getting photo gigs here and there, and working at a warehouse. I mean, childcare was just hard.
Yeah.
And so we kind of made the decision for our family to come to Florence and just give it a shot and see what happens. So I started working part-time for the video business, and was still doing my photography part-time, which was, it kind of balanced out financially. So it was great, because I still had a base.
Sure.
But I spent probably that first year in 2014. We moved in April 2014. I spent that first 8 months still commuting to Charleston for all of the wedding work that I had on contract. And even probably the next 2 years, I'd say 90% of the weddings I got were still Charleston based. So,
Yeah. So I mean, so you've been in photo land, you get this job offer. Now you're starting to learn, starting to learn video. I mean, what kind of cameras were you shooting video? I mean, are you shooting DSLRs? Are you shooting cinema gear? What's the?
We were on DSLRs for the most part.
I mean, not only you've never done video, you've never done audio. You've
No,
never
I didn't
edited
know.
video.
I
I
was,
mean, it's
I was as green as these placemats. I mean, it was not good in the video world. But I was also given a lot of freedom to fail at it.
yeah,
And say, my boss is real gracious. He was like, "Hey,
yeah,
just learn as much as you can, do your thing." Because again, he really just needed somebody to assist and kind of edit some stuff. I had never edited video. I
yeah,
had never used a video camera, and so our rigs were primarily DSLR. So I at least knew the body and my way
sure,
around it. But I was like, why is my shutter speed so slow?
yeah.
Like what?
I can't turn it into portrait.
Yeah, like
what?
I was exposing for photos
So-
and trying to shoot videos, and it was terrible.
yeah,
So I had to retrain my brain to
Yeah.
use a tool in a completely different fashion. I kept wanting to frame this stuff in portrait orientation. It's like,
Yeah.
no, it's a video.
Yeah,
It's
you
got to
can't-
all be
can't do that, yeah.
landscape. And so um, I dove in with both feet into Premiere. I was given a book,
Nice.
After Effects CS5.
Oh my god!
And it's like, hey, I have this software, and this was pre-CC, so like you still bought the software.
Gosh.
It's like, hey, I have this. I want
For
you
After
to
Effects.
learn it. And I was like,
For After Effects.
yeah. And I was like, yeah,
good
okay.
Lord.
I had no idea what After Effects was. And so
Ugh.
I remember opening the program and it was like, no thanks.
I cannot imagine trying to learn
Yeah.
After Effects from a
And,
book.
and he didn't even know After Effects. So it was like, hey, learn this. It's supposed to be cool for,
Sure.
motion stuff. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, cool, whatever. And I like, no way.
Ew,
am I gonna
keyframes,
learn this.
Like,
Yeah. So I probably 2014 to 2015 was a massive technical growth year for me for video. I had to learn how to set up lights, how to set up audio, and I mean
Yeah.
basic stuff like lavalier mics. Like we weren't using booms at the time. I mean, I had to learn everything on a beginner level. And I really learned at that point how to not take critique personally.
Mhm.
Because I mean, my video stuff was getting, you say I ripped your video stuff to shreds. Like I feel like I got, put on a cheese grater sometimes.
Yeah.
But it was never like, hey, this, to your point, it wasn't like, hey,
Yeah.
this is garbage. It's just like, hey, that's not how we do things here.
Yeah.
Here's how
Here's how
do
we're gonna
things.
do it. Yeah.
Fit this mold. Here's why we make these cuts here and there.
Sure.
And I really learned the
Yeah.
art of a 2-minute promo. I mean, that was our bread and butter by
Yeah.
and large. And so I think it was around the end or middle of 2015 that the C300 Mark I came out.
Amazing.
And we bought it.
Yep.
And I remember when my boss told me it was like a $15,000 camera at the time or
Mhm.
13 or something crazy. And I remember when he went and got it and he brought it back and I didn't like the image on it. It's like, there's something about it. I was like, this doesn't look good. But I was also used to seeing these soft edge DSLR video images. And so seeing something real, it was actually kind of difficult for me to work with it. And the camera's just daunting, right? I mean,
Yeah, you're going from DSLR to cinema.
it's basically holding a Rubik's Cube with a lens. That's what I felt like. I was like, I don't know, like, what do I press? And so, I spent a good 3 to 6 months really just figuring that camera out. And then I was like, I feel like this camera can do more than what we're doing on it.
Mhm.
And then I learned that we were basically using it in auto. And what I mean by that is, we did the manual settings, but we never touched a color profile.
Yeah.
And so that opened up a whole new can of worms for me and kind of brought my painting degree full circle because
Yeah.
as I started learning about video color profiles,
hmm
I was like, I know what this color wheel is.
Yeah.
Like
It's
that
all
makes-
color theory.
Yeah, this makes total sense. And so it made my color grading kind of progress really quickly because
Sure.
I didn't know what scopes were, but when I saw them on screen, I was like, that's a color wheel.
Yeah.
Like,
You knew what to do with them.
yeah, I
Yeah.
knew exactly what to push and pull and how to kind of manipulate stuff. And so
Sure.
that was kind of my first technical explosion into really progressing and being a well-rounded
Yeah.
videographer, editor.
Sure.
I don't know the term.
Yeah. So you're working full time at the video agency, right?
Yeah, so I did end up getting offered full time. I think it was probably 6 or 8 months in.
Yeah.
And I was real hesitant about taking that. It was really hard for me to let go of my wedding photography business.
Yeah, so
I felt like
you
I
were
was
still
letting go
shooting
of it.
some weddings at that point.
I was shooting some, but again, they're on weekends, so it wasn't like
wasn't a big deal.
it felt like a big deal, but when I kind of took that full time, it actually put a big weight off of my shoulders financially because I was able to rely on a full time paycheck. I still didn't have a ton of weddings anyway. I think I maybe had 12 to 14, and that was kind of my sweet spot for about 2 years, which is kind of a lot, but it's also kind of not. It's busy-ish. But yeah, I ended up going full time and started to get more and more responsibility. And I think it was maybe 2016 we brought in an audio engineer.
Yeah.
Kevin Smith, great dude, super talented.
The company, company's growing.
Yeah, and that was the interesting thing is that once I went on full time, it's like our work tripled. I always thought that it would be like, okay, one person can handle X amount, 2 people, you just double that. And it doesn't work that way. You bring in another person and you can actually take on like 2.5 times more work. And that's really what happened. We just started getting more and more and changed the business structure into more of a creative agency at that point. So instead of just being, one-man band productions, it was, let's give it a go as an agency.
Yeah.
And so that was a really trying and challenging year in a great way for me to just say, okay, it's time to step up to the next level. And from the engineering standpoint, I love that. It's like all the stuff that I learned in school about photography stuff, over the years had finally clicked from a technical standpoint and was now becoming, true muscle memory. The video stuff was as well. And so it was a big, just technical boost for me of saying, all right, get the most you can out of this gear. And that was basically the principle. And I just dove in with both feet.
So, you're at the agency, everything's growing. You've hired people, it's agency format. You're still doing a handful of weddings, right? Like every year you're still.
Yeah, I kind of stopped, pushing them and marketing them and was really starting to focus on video and, kind of thought that was going to be the end all be all. Like, the photo stuff will always be there. It's not like you forget how to do that. But I wasn't pursuing that anymore. And it's not, it's not that I disliked weddings, but I also felt that like I had really plateaued as far as what I was producing as a wedding photographer. Like I wasn't necessarily seeking new techniques, right? Like I've got my poses down. I've got my flow down. I mean, if the couple says you've got 10 minutes to make us look great, I know kind of the things that I can do.
Yeah.
And I was really caught in that rut. And so it was nice to have the video to kind of pour into and learn a new creative set. But my photography just kind of sat on this plateau for a while. So I wasn't really pushing it and was really thinking video was going to be the thing forever.
This is it. Yeah. So you eventually end up leaving the agency, and then, I think it's interesting because it's, with my work, I'm, often pitching to people in your new role, so kind of, take it from you're going to creative agency into, kind of where you are now.
Yeah. So right now, as of recording, say that because who knows? But right now I am a marketing director for a hospitality management company, which basically means we own and operate hotels. And that's a pretty big shift for me going from wedding photographer to, now my current position.
You're shooting interior. You're doing architecture photography, somewhat, real estate photography. You're doing aerials, you're.
Yeah, it's a completely different vein.
New
techniques.
techniques.
I can do photos and videos.
You're doing headshots, portraits. You're doing, talking head interviews. You're kind of, you're.
Yeah, it's kind of. You're right. It's kind of a culmination of all this random
all
stuff.
The things you've been doing have kind of, like you said, culminated.
But I left the agency in the fall of 2019. It was unexpected, not planned, or it was not part of the long-term vision. But I left and really spent kind of a month in limbo. And I was thinking, you know, by then I had, got 3 kids at this point
Yeah.
and a wife and a mortgage and all the things. And I'm like, all right,
Couple of doodles running around. Yeah.
effing doodles. Don't even get me started. Um, but yeah, so I mean, I had quite a deal of responsibility to figure out. And I was really heavily considering just starting my own company because
Yeah.
it's what I knew. It's not like you forget stuff once you leave a job, but I was really on the fence in a lot of ways. One, because I didn't really know how I was going to do it by myself. It's just a lot of legwork to start a company, and I was afraid of the same mistakes that I had made at the deli, to be honest. And I was like, I haven't saved up enough to start a company. I mean, in that month, we had burned through a large portion of our general savings because I didn't have any income. And it's like,
Sure.
I'm going to have to start this company on a credit card, and I really didn't want to do that. And the people I wanted to work with, to be honest, were already still tied up at the agency anyway. So, it was like I had built this team and was part of something great, and now have to figure out something new. But fortunately, I got offered the job at the company I'm at now, and things have been great in that regard from like a family standpoint.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
there's still always this desire to be in this photo video world.
Which you still are, it's just in a slightly different capacity.
I still am. You're right. It's in a different capacity. And honestly, I will say, having to be in this marketing role from a business standpoint, like I think now if I had to start a business, I wouldn't have any doubts about, kind of where to go and how
Here's
to
what you're
position
doing,
it and do stuff, which is great. I don't want to be in that position anytime soon, but yeah, now I shoot maybe 4 or 5 weddings a year, which is great. It's just enough to make filing the taxes worth it.
Yeah.
It's vacation money.
Yeah.
And I largely rent whatever gear I need for weddings because.
What's your photo body now?
My body now?
Yeah, that you own, that you have.
So I only kept one body from all the things because, and I bought a dirt cheap Tamron 28 to 75 constant aperture 2.8. I spent $150 on it.
Oh yeah,
that's my super emergency lens. Like if I gotta take a picture, it's a kit lens that's 2.8 throughout.
Sure.
We'll put it that way.
Yeah,
but I still have my trusted 5D Mark III.
Nice.
There's something about the pictures that camera makes that I really enjoy it. And I've kept it up to date. And so if I'm shooting a wedding now, what I do is I'll rent an R series body and use RF glass so it's just so good.
Yeah.
The RF glass is
pretty crazy.
I don't like what they charge for it, but I'm gonna pay it anyway. Like it's so good. But I use my Mark III as my secondary body, and I'll usually just leave like a 70 to 200 on it or something like that. But that's kind of my setup for weddings now.
Yeah.
But at the agency, I mean, I got experience with all kind of cinema bodies, high grade lighting.
I mean, you've shot on everything. I mean, you've shot on DSLR, shot on Canon cinema gear. You've shot on Red. I mean, you've kind of done the whole circle.
Yeah, and that was one of the. I will say, in that kind of 1 month lull, is I got to work with a company called 7 Cinematics who does live production. A buddy of mine was the DP there, and I got to really just have some fun experiences. 9-10 camera, Reds, with a live switchboard, and you've got the headphones on, and the guy's telling you when your shot's going to come up and when you're live, and he's fussing at you for poor framing, and I mean it's intense and a lot of fun at the same time. So I've had some really cool experiences, and we worked with a lot of cool people at the agency. I mean, don't get me wrong, I got to travel to India. That was nuts in itself.
Yeah. It's brought a lot of cool experiences for sure.
Yeah, it was really cool and a lot of fun. And I don't know that I would necessarily change much of getting to where I am now.
Yeah.
To be honest.
Do you have any advice for people, I mean, you can answer a lot of different, directions. I mean, do you have any advice for people trying to start their own business, or if they're looking for a creative role within another company, like what? First, we'll start with this. Do you have any advice for people starting their own, photography, videography, creative business?
I would say yes. I would say if you're going to start any business, you gotta want it.
Yeah.
Like, and I I would think most people think that they want it, but like you have to want it
Yeah.
every day. I mean, because it nobody's going to care about your business the same way you care about
No.
it. Nobody. You can hire, you can hire your best man, and
Yeah.
they're still not going to care the same
No.
way that you care.
A lot of sacrifice, I feel like.
Yeah,
You
it's
gotta,
a lot of sacrifice and it's hard work, but it also can be it can be the most rewarding, the most fun thing ever,
Yeah.
as well as the most scary and stressful thing. But I would say if you're going to start a business, the first thing you got to do is want it, and the second thing you need to do is find somebody else who owns a business that can be a mentor
Yeah.
for you, or multiple
Yeah.
people.
there's just so many things to navigate that you're not even necessarily like just from a photo or video standpoint. I mean, taxes, how to start an LLC. I mean,
I
just
don't think it's
like,
enough to just go on YouTube and take
No,
courses. I
you-
mean,
you
you need to find
need
somebody
someone.
in your area, because your local codes and laws are always going to be different than, somebody on YouTube.
100%.
And if you can find somebody in your area doing the thing you want to do, even
Yeah.
better. But find a business mentor. Like I made a boatload of business mistakes early on, just thinking that I could do things faster,
Mm-hmm.
knowing the conventional wisdom and just thinking I could do things faster. And I'd say the next piece is don't rush it. Like we're, there's a saying that I've kind of always tried to adhere to, which I don't always, but it's, work the work or the work will work you.
Yeah.
And it's like, and all that comes down to is take care of business, right? Pick up the phone when it rings,
Mhm.
right? Send the email when you need to send the email.
Yeah.
File your taxes when they're due. Just it sounds like really simple stuff, but a lot of times those are the things that I personally put on the shelf just out of procrastination. I'd rather be shooting instead of doing the actual things that allow you to actually cash a check.
Yeah.
And that those are probably the big things I would say to anybody looking to start a business.
And so, on top of that, what are some of the biggest, lessons you feel like you may have learned, whether from shooting weddings or, like at the agency? What are some of the biggest takeaways, just off the top of your head that you've had, from your years of shooting?
I'll put it in two categories. One will be business and one will be kind of general principles, if you will. And so
Sure.
for the business, I would say the biggest takeaway would be, don't get complacent when things are good.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is, if you've got the phones ringing off the hook and you're crushing it, great. But don't always think that that's always going to be there. Like you should be hustling the same way as when you had 0 gigs versus when your calendar's full.
Yeah.
Because the reality is, and specifically weddings, but certainly with corporate work as well, it doesn't take much for people to be like, we don't have the money to do this right now. So your job. So the pandemic is a great example of that. A lot of businesses just, out of their hands, of course, but
Sure.
it's like, hey, we have to put a hold on things for a while. And so, being able to have this funnel of work coming in, to basically offset the unexpected is kind of the biggest business principle that I've learned. And
fair enough.
I guess the other general one would be treat people well. And I think that's the biggest thing that I found that people want more than your product is they want to be treated like people.
Yeah.
Right? Like don't ever think that somebody, just because they don't do this for a living, that they don't know what they're talking about. Like if they're paying your check, I mean, you need to, just be polite, be patient with people on set. There's a lot of stuff out of your hands. At the end of the day, most people are just doing their job by even hiring you. Like they're in the marketing role. Like their boss probably said, "Hey, we need to do a campaign." You're like, "Okay, well, I'll go find somebody to shoot it." I mean, just be patient with people and just treat people well, and that will get you so much farther. Whether
Yeah.
you're the business owner, whether you're a subcontractor,
Sure.
whether you are, the person running and grabbing coffee,
Yeah.
you don't know who knows who.
Yep.
I've had so many gigs just come from, "Oh, I know such and they said that you were great to work with."
Yep.
They never saw a thing that I shot or
100%.
produced. They've never worked with me.
Yeah.
They just heard that I was easy to work with or
Yeah.
great to work with.
Sure.
Like I shot a birthday party for a gentleman's 70th birthday.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to do the gig, but I charged a lot for it, and they ended up going for it. And I was like, okay, great. And while I was there, they're like, "Hey, our daughter's getting married here next spring, and we just like the way you do stuff."
Yeah.
I was like, "Yes, here's my card."
Sweet.
And so
Yeah.
it's
You
just
never
that thing
know.
of
You never know.
never ever know
Yeah.
what's going to come out of something. So just
100%.
treat people well.
100%. What's the so what's the next step? What's the next creative thing? What do you want to do?
I honestly don't know, and I think about it often because where I am right now is, 3 kids, they're 6, 8, and 3, or 8, 6, and 3, whatever order you want.
One
to
of
go.
those combos.
All the math works. My wife's got a part-time job at a school doing her thing, and I'm in this marketing role, and it's not that I don't consider it long-term by any stretch. I love the company I work for.
Yeah.
You're
They're
talking about
awesome.
treating people
Yeah,
well.
they
They
are
treat
awesome.
people well. They are awesome, and I have no intention or desire to leave. But I guess it's weird because I didn't seek this job as part of the plan, but I'm doing it the best that I can, learning everything that I can, and trying to serve them well. So I don't really know what the next step is. I mean, I like to think someday it'll be back into kind of full-time commercial video
Mhm.
world. I would love to teach in some capacity at some point as well.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's out of school or just making courses and,
Sure.
for air quotes, YouTube, if you will.
Yeah.
But I love teaching. I love sharing just the random junk. And
Yeah. That you know.
when you say of the two of us here, I know all the random, right? and so I don't know the answer to that question. I think
Yeah.
about it, from time to time. But for right now, and we'll keep working the work.
There you
See
go.
what happens.
Cool. Well, thanks for sharing.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, and thanks everybody for
Thank
tuning
y'all for
in and
listening.
listening and giving us your time. You can check us out as always on Spotify, Apple Podcasts as well. If you're watching on YouTube, thank you so much.
Yeah.
If you're on every platform, you know what to do.
Yep. Subscribe, follow, like,
follow,
all the things.
And if you have a question for us or anything that you want us to follow up on, hit us up on our Instagram at Good Grain Podcast.
Yeah.
And we would love to hear from you. Leave it in the YouTube comments. And we will catch you guys on the next episode.
See y'all later.